county pension fund has invested in Russian bonds and stocks.
They invest in international bond funds and in international stock funds. One of the things I demanded in this week's retirement board meeting is that when they invest in new funds, be they mutual funds or exchange traded funds, that the county publish the top 50 holdings in that fund. I'll give you an example. We used to own our county tank, our returns tank, because we had 90% of our bond money in one fund called Dodge and Cox, and astonishingly, some of those holdings included Lehman Brothers, which is bankrupt, Washington Mutual, WAMU, which is bankrupt, and huge positions in credit default swaps, which is insane for a small county like us. Consequently, the bond returns tanked, and the county is going to be taking a huge loss. And one of the things I demanded in Wednesday's meeting was that not just that the retirement board not publish just what our holdings are by fund name, but also what the top 50 holdings are holdings within each fund. I think taxpayers deserve to know that. So I'd be interested in knowing whether we own some Russian bonds, and when we own an international stock fund, and if some of those stocks are Russian stocks, well, what are those companies?
And vice versa. What does Russia own in the United States now? Or have they jumped out and sold all their GM?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Jay. Actually, Russia was quite heavily invested in Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae.
Were they really?
And the way this would work is they sell oil to out onto the international market. Of course, maybe the physical barrels don't make it here to California, but nonetheless, their oil is out on the market. We go to the gas station, buy that gas. Money goes back to Russia, and they reinvest it in Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, and they own a small slice of your house. And this is part of the historic transfer of wealth from the United States to petroleum-producing countries that's occurred over the last decade. Essentially giving some of these countries ownership of our companies, of our property, in exchange for the money we spend on our energy.
And essentially what they've done is subsidize our national debt by buying treasuries, correct?
That's right, and also subsidize our trade deficit,
right,
significantly. And really, the risk is not that they'll continue doing this. This is quite good, and under appropriate circumstances should be welcomed. But the risk is that they'll stop investing in dollars and in U.S. equities. And in the case of Russia, actually they sold most of their position in U.S. mortgages.
All right, so let's run that by our listeners one more time. So here we had institutions like very poorly run institutions, as we now know in retrospect, very poorly managed institutions like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, issuing all this subprime debt, all this junk bond debt, and foreign investors like Russia, but also like China, like Saudi Arabia, all these central banks that had the cash, buy these Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae, you name it, subprimes. And effectively what they do is they subsidize our national debt. They subsidize our currency as well. These are the things that artificially prop up our currency. And now, since all these subprimes have gone down the toilet, these buyers, like Russia, have disappeared. So one of a major prop of our economy, a major prop of our national debt, and a major prop of the U.S. dollar has now been pulled away. And what happens next? What happens next, Andrew?
Well, it's funny because Andrew and I talked a little bit about this. From our generation, and John, you're a little bit older, but from our generation, our perspective, and again, me and Andrew have talked about this, is that there's a lot of baggage involved in what's going on as far as international politics go, and it doesn't seem like the leaders will ever let that go. It seems like it's perpetuated and perpetuated until even when they die, their heirs take over. So there's this constant kind of war of the royals, so to speak. So you have the Bush, King George Bush all the way down to Jeb Bush, which will probably be the next president, I would think. But that whole kind of fighting that goes on between these kind of long-running feuds, kind of the Hatfield-McCoy type stuff.
Yes.
And so what happens when, or will it ever happen that people will forgive and forget, or is it always going to be this kind of underlying, oh, it's the Red Scare, oh, it's communism, oh, it's Hitler, and all these things that happened in the past, oh, it's slavery, whatever it may be, that people hold these long-running grudges. And Andrew, can you talk a little bit about the Russian perspective on that? Because I think I know that the United States perspective, it's not my perspective, but do the Russian people feel that way, or is it just the Russian bureaucracy that still is holding that?
Well, I think it's mostly the Russian elite that carries this baggage, and to have a Hatfield-McCoy fight, you have to have both the Hatfields and the McCoys, and the Russians are certainly playing their role in this. It's not all one side to blame, and especially lately, there's been quite a bit of rhetoric and rising nationalism in Russia that they've really redirected their people's attention from looking at some of the problems they have with falling oil prices, with lack of reform, and they've decided that the real problem is America, and they want to focus their attention on blaming the West. And while there's certainly things to blame, I think that they should also look inward, and this is my perspective as somebody who lives in Russia. I think that it's really dinosaurs on both sides who perpetuate some of these issues. Of course, there are underlying conflicts of interest and national interest that simply cannot be reconciled and have to be bargained over.
I want to come back to the question you didn't answer. You have Russia, China, the Middle East, either slowing down their buying of U.S. treasuries and other government instruments, or not buying them at all. What happens next here in the United States when these institutional buyers of our junk bond national debt disappear?
Well, I think it might be a little bit early to make this prediction, and this is a prediction that the Russian Prime Minister Putin has made, saying that it's the end of U.S. leadership in international economic affairs. But I'm not sure it's quite time to write us off. In every economic era of economic instability, it's traditional that investors go to the dollar and they run to the dollar. And the thinking was that maybe it would be different this time, that because of the large reserve funds in Russia and elsewhere, that investors might not do this, that they might in fact flee U.S. assets and go to some of the emerging markets. But that